This antioxidant saved a dying cell in inflammation. Imagine a single cell inside you right now. Its mitochondria are failing, stress signals are flashing like emergency lights, and it's screaming for help. Most people try to help with ordinary turmeric, but science reveals that 99% of it never reaches where it's needed. In today's video, I'm going to show you the antioxidant that managed to invade this cellular factory and reset the healing systems. I'll show you the science behind a real cellular rescue and the exact 30-day plan you can test to feel these effects on your energy and inflammation. I'll show you why most turmeric on your plate can't do that, why some shortcuts like black pepper can be risky, and why a clever delivery system based on a fenugreek-derived glucomannan colloid appears to get curcumin where it needs to go. We'll trace 3 compartments: gut, bloodstream, and inside the cell, explain the biological switches involved: NF-κB, NRF2, glutathione, mitochondria, BDNF, spell out the safety trade-offs, and give you a practical 30-day plan you can try for yourself. I'll also share one product I used as an example, but that's optional and clearly labeled. If you want the product I tested and the 30-day experiment plan I used, click the link in the description and hit subscribe for more deep dive guides. Now let's get into the science. The ugly truth about turmeric is that it spends most of its life in the gut. Think of the journey a compound must take as a 3-stage trip. First the gut, then the bloodstream, where the liver stands like a customs officer, and finally the cell interior, the actual factory floor where genes and organelles live. Plain turmeric, the powdered spice you sprinkle on food, is excellent at staying in that first compartment. That's great for certain local effects, but it means very little reaches the bloodstream and almost none crosses into cells. To put numbers on it, when you eat plain turmeric, roughly 99% of the curcumin content lingers in the gut, where it interacts with microbes and the intestinal lining. Less than 1% makes it into the bloodstream. Add black pepper, piperine, and you might raise blood levels into the range of about 5 to 8% of what would otherwise appear. That spike can look impressive on a lab test, but it comes with a cost. Piperine increases intestinal permeability, which can worsen or trigger symptoms in people with leaky gut, IBS, IBD, or certain autoimmune tendencies. There's another route: encapsulate curcumin in a fenugreek-derived glucomannan colloid. This carrier forms small water-compatible bubbles around curcumin, slowing release, protecting it from the liver's first-pass clearance, and dramatically increasing how much reaches the bloodstream. Estimates center on roughly 15 to 30% reaching blood. Even more importantly, the intracellular delivery can be multiplied by somewhere between 25 and 40 times, compared to plain turmeric. In plain terms, the same raw curcumin that sits trapped in the gut can, when formulated the right way, actually get inside cells at meaningful concentrations. Why does that matter? Because the rescue of a struggling cell requires actions that happen inside the cell. Turning off a pro-inflammatory program, turning on antioxidant defenses, boosting cellular detox systems, and protecting energy production. Let's walk through what happens in each compartment and how these mechanisms translate into a cellular rescue. In the gut, plain turmeric is unusually useful. The intestinal lining is an ecosystem. Microbes, immune cells, mucus layers, and epithelial cells all talking to each other. Curcumin that stays in the gut can feed beneficial bacteria, modulate local immune signaling, strengthen the mucus barrier and tight junctions in many people, and help digestion through improved bile flow. These are real, measurable effects, and they can show up in a week or 2. If your primary goal is comfort, reduced bloating, or a healthier gut microbiome, culinary turmeric used regularly can be a low-cost, safe strategy. The bloodstream is the next compartment. When curcumin appears in blood, it's available to tissues across the body and can lower circulating inflammatory markers, things like CRP, TNF-A, and IL-6, at least transiently. That's useful for overall systemic inflammation. Piperine can elevate those blood levels quickly. It's a potent enhancer. But remember the trade-off. Increasing absorption by compromising intestinal barrier integrity can be counterproductive, especially for people with gut disorders or autoimmune predisposition. For short-term, controlled use in people without gut sensitivity, piperine-boosted formulations may provide a temporary systemic effect. But for long-term strategies aimed at correcting inflammation at the source, we need a safer way to get curcumin past the liver and into cells. So we come to the cell, the place where recovery is decided. Inside a cell, curcumin's effects are less about being an antioxidant in the traditional scavenger sense and more about changing gene expression and signaling networks. There are a few key mechanisms to understand, each tied to the concept of cellular resilience. NF-κB, nuclear factor kappa B. Think of NF-κB as a pro-inflammatory master switch. When NF-κB is active, lots of genes that drive inflammation, immune activation, and stress responses get turned on. Intracellular curcumin is associated with down-regulating NF-κB, which means the cell reduces the production of pro-inflammatory signals. That helps stop the self-perpetuating loop of inflammation. NRF2, nuclear factor erythroid 2-related factor 2. NRF2 is the opposite kind of master switch. It turns on antioxidant and detoxification genes. Activating NRF2 ramps up cellular defenses, including enzymes that neutralize reactive species and help with repair. Curcumin can activate NRF2, nudging the cell toward protection and recovery. Glutathione. This is the cell's primary small molecule antioxidant and a critical detoxifier. Higher intracellular glutathione means the cell can handle oxidative stress and repair damaged proteins and lipids. Curcumin's influence on glutathione synthesis and recycling is part of how it supports cellular health. Mitochondrial protection. Mitochondria are the cell's power plants. When they're damaged during inflammation, energy production falls and the cell moves toward death. Curcumin inside the cell has been associated with stabilizing mitochondrial membranes, improving energy output, and reducing the release of pro-death factors. BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Although best known for supporting neurons and plasticity, BDNF is part of a broader picture of cellular repair and resilience in nervous tissue. Intracellular curcumin has been linked to increased BDNF expression, which may contribute to neuroprotective and cognitive benefits when curcumin reaches brain cells. Taken together, down-regulating NF-κB, upregulating NRF2, increasing glutathione, protecting mitochondria, and elevating BDNF represent a coherent set of actions that can move a cell from dying to recovering. That's the biological story behind our opening image. But none of that helps unless curcumin actually gets inside the cell, and that's the crux of the delivery problem. Let's compare 3 practical delivery strategies and the trade-offs to consider. First, culinary turmeric. Pros: safe, cheap, great for gut health. You get local effects on microbiome, inflammation at the intestinal lining, and bile-mediated digestion. Cons: almost none of the curcumin travels beyond the gut. If your goal is intracellular rescue in tissues beyond the intestine, culinary use alone is unlikely to be sufficient. Second, turmeric with piperine, black pepper. Pros: significantly increases blood levels of curcumin compared with plain turmeric, typically into the 5 to 8% range of available curcumin. For short-term targeted use, that spike can reduce systemic inflammatory markers. Cons: piperine increases intestinal permeability, which is a risk for people with leaky gut, IBS, IBD, and some autoimmune conditions. For someone already prone to gut barrier dysfunction, piperine can worsen the underlying problem, undermining any short-term systemic benefit. Third, curcumin formulated in a fenugreek-derived glucomannan colloid. Pros: this formulation forms tiny, water-compatible carriers that shield curcumin from rapid liver clearance and release it gradually. The net effect in studies and pharmacokinetic estimates is that roughly 15 to 30% of the curcumin can appear in blood, much higher than piperine in many cases, and then intracellular uptake is boosted dramatically by about 25 to 40x compared with plain turmeric. That means a single, properly formulated capsule can deliver intracellular exposure equivalent to a vast quantity of powdered turmeric. Cons: these specialized supplements cost more than culinary turmeric, and not every product on the market uses a truly effective colloid. Quality matters. Also, while safety profiles appear good for most people, long-term data in large clinical populations is still limited compared with centuries of culinary use. Let me make the equivalence math concrete so you can see the scale. Imagine you eat a tablespoon of powdered turmeric. Call it a few grams. Most of that, remember, stays in the gut. If you wanted an equivalent intracellular exposure using plain turmeric, you would need an impractically large amount of powder because less than 1% reaches blood and intracellular uptake is minimal. A fenugreek colloid curcumin supplement, by contrast, concentrates and protects curcumin so that a single small capsule may produce intracellular exposures similar to what hundreds of grams, or in some comparisons even kilograms, of culinary turmeric could not achieve. The exact equivalence depends on the curcumin content per capsule and the specific formulation. But the key idea is that the delivery multiplier, 25 and 40x intracellular, turns small, manageable doses into useful intracellular concentrations. When assessing options, ask 3 questions. 1. What compartment am I targeting? The gut, the bloodstream, or the cell interior? 2. What safety trade-offs am I willing to accept? 3. Is there quality evidence that the formulation actually increases intracellular exposure, not just blood levels? Now let's turn to timing, and what you might realistically expect if you test these strategies for yourself. Short-term changes, about 7 to 10 days. If you start using culinary turmeric daily, many people notice improved digestion, less bloating, and gentle shifts in bowel comfort within the first week or 2. That's consistent with local effects on the microbiome and intestinal lining. If you use a piperine-enhanced product, you might see early systemic changes in inflammation markers fairly quickly, but remember the potential gut permeability trade-off. If you start a fenugreek colloid curcumin supplement, the earliest effects you feel might be subtle: reduced joint stiffness, a sense of easier movement, or slightly improved energy, because intracellular processes take a little time to translate into systemic feeling. Medium-term changes, about 3 to 4 weeks, roughly 30 days. This is where intracellular effects become more apparent. When curcumin actually reaches cells and influences gene switches, you give NRF2 a sustained opportunity to boost antioxidant defenses, NF-κB to calm down, glutathione levels to increase, and mitochondria to stabilize. People often report clearer thinking, steadier energy, and measurable reductions in rolling inflammation markers over a month. That's why a 30-day focused experiment is a useful way to evaluate whether a concentrated intracellular strategy is having meaningful effects for you personally. What should a practical plan look like? Here's a conservative, non-prescriptive framework you can consider. Keep using culinary turmeric as part of meals every day. It's safe, supports your gut ecosystem, and is a cornerstone of daily dietary anti-inflammatory habits. If you have no gut sensitivity and you want a short trial of increased systemic exposure, some people use a piperine-containing product for a brief period, but do this cautiously and be aware of the permeability trade-off. If you have IBS, IBD, leaky gut, or autoimmune gut conditions, avoid piperine unless advised otherwise by a clinician. For targeted intracellular effects, consider a high-quality fenugreek colloid curcumin supplement as an adjunct to your dietary turmeric. Use the product as the manufacturer suggests, but frame it as an experiment. Try it for 30 days. Track specific outcomes: sleep, joint pain, energy, digestion, mood, or objective markers if you have lab access, and then reassess. I tried one such product myself as an example during a controlled month-long test. I'll stress this is a personal trial, not clinical proof. Over the first week, I noticed mild improvements in digestion and less post-meal heaviness. By week 3, I felt steadier energy and reduced joint stiffness during exercise compared with baseline. Those subjective observations are consistent with what intracellular curcumin activity would predict: NF-κB quieting, NRF2 support, and mitochondrial stabilization, but they are not definitive clinical evidence. Use them as a story of what's possible rather than a guarantee. Safety deserves another careful look. Piperine increases intestinal permeability. For people with pre-existing gut barrier dysfunction, IBS, IBD, or certain autoimmune conditions, this can be harmful. Even in otherwise healthy people, repeatedly increasing intestinal permeability is not something to do lightly. The fenugreek colloid approach avoids this specific permeability trade-off because it does not rely on opening the gut barrier to boost blood levels. Instead, it protects curcumin through the gut and helps it be absorbed without compromising tight junctions. Some practical safety tips: don't exceed recommended product dosages on labels. Avoid long-term reliance on piperine unless under clinical supervision. And if you have a history of gastrointestinal disease, autoimmune disorder, or are on medications with complex interactions, check with a healthcare provider before starting a new concentrated supplement. If you're pregnant or breastfeeding, consult your clinician. Many supplements have limited safety data in those situations. It's also worth recognizing cost and accessibility. Culinary turmeric is inexpensive and widely available. Fenugreek colloid curcumin supplements cost more, but require far smaller daily amounts thanks to their delivery efficiency. When deciding, balance price against how much intracellular exposure you want. A targeted supplement can be cost-effective compared with trying to eat unrealistic amounts of powdered turmeric. Before I close, here's a simple way to frame your personal 30-day experiment if you want to see whether a concentrated intracellular strategy helps you. Baseline. Take notes or a short checklist for 1 week before starting. Track sleep, energy, joint, muscle stiffness, digestion, mood, and any objective measure you can. Weight, blood pressure, or labs if available. Intervention. Continue culinary turmeric daily. Add 1 fenugreek colloid curcumin supplement as the product suggests. This is an example, not medical advice. Avoid piperine unless you've weighed the trade-offs and don't have gut sensitivity. Monitoring. Keep a daily log of symptoms. Every week note any changes and rate them on a simple scale, 0 to 10, for clarity. After 30 days, compare with baseline. Decision point. If you see consistent, meaningful improvement without new side effects, you can consider maintaining the approach with periodic breaks. If not, reassess and consult a provider. Remember the language of biology here. Curcumin can help by shifting gene expression and supporting antioxidant systems, but that depends on intracellular exposure. Culinary turmeric supports gut health. Piperine boosts blood levels, but increases gut permeability. Fenugreek colloid formulations aim to increase both blood and intracellular exposure without opening the gut barrier. Those are trade-offs, not moral choices. A few closing clarifications to keep expectations honest. None of this is a magic bullet that cures diseases. The evidence shows mechanisms and associations that make intracellular curcumin a plausible tool in a broader anti-inflammatory strategy. Clinical outcomes vary between individuals, and long-term, large-scale clinical trials for some formulations are still limited. Use this as an informed approach rather than a promise. If you want one concrete example, a fenugreek colloid curcumin product marketed as a high-absorption formula is what I tested. I'm mentioning it strictly as an example of the type of formulation that aims to achieve the intracellular delivery we've discussed. I used it during my 30-day personal test and shared the subjective results earlier. If you click the link in the description, you'll find the exact product I tried. That link is an optional resource. Choose products carefully, check ingredient lists, and prefer brands that provide clear pharmacokinetic or absorption data. To wrap up, the dramatic image from the start, a dying, inflamed cell rescued by an antioxidant, is scientifically plausible when the antioxidant reaches the intracellular environment and influences key switches, lowering NF-κB, boosting NRF2, increasing glutathione, guarding mitochondria, and supporting BDNF where relevant. Most culinary turmeric stays in the gut and is excellent for local benefits. Piperine can increase blood levels but risks increasing gut permeability. A fenugreek-derived glucomannan colloid appears to be a practical way to protect curcumin through the gut and into the bloodstream, and then into cells, producing intracellular exposure that can be tens of times higher than plain turmeric, and potentially enough to trigger the cellular rescue sequence. Try a focused 30-day approach if this aligns with your goals. Use culinary turmeric daily for gut support, and consider a fenugreek colloid curcumin supplement as a targeted intracellular strategy. Track your symptoms. Be mindful of safety, especially if you have IBS, IBD, or autoimmune gut issues, and consult a healthcare professional before starting any new concentrated supplement. Share your results and experiences in the comments. I'll read them and follow up with a future video that tallies common patterns and lessons from people who tried the experiment. If this breakdown helped you understand why delivery matters as much as the compound itself, subscribe for more deep dive explanations and practical experiment plans. Try the 30-day experiment, report back below, and let's keep learning which strategies actually help real people.